to start going, and we'll continue on this. But this is a very free form discussion, so don't hesitate. I had a fellow yesterday who stayed on the line till after the meeting closed, and he had almost said nothing during the whole of the meeting. And he said, I really didn't have anything that I thought was important enough to say. And I said, well, I'll turn the camera back on. You just go ahead and talk. And he talked for about 15 minutes extemporaneously, just talking about camp life at that camp. That's exactly the kind of information we want to record at this. And he felt it wasn't valuable, wasn't important. It was great stuff. So don't hold back for any particular reason.
Terry, I want to ask you a question. I don't remember you at Vinja. Were you there before me or after me?
I was not in Vinja. I'm doing this for every single camp in Vietnam.
I was talking to Terry.
Oh, Terry.
What camp?
Vinja.
I don't think I was ever at Binjan.
I was at Vinja.
Okay.
I was at Vinja for a year.
All right. Let me see.
I was in
Terry, you were there as the SF advisor for 2 months in 1970, from March to May, actually March almost to June, 3 months. You were you were the senior SF advisor for the LLDB camp. Terry?
I was at B40 and A-403 for about a year, from mid 69 to mid 70. Before that, I was in the Trang at the IDF and IDC, but I served with Tibor at B40, the Mike Force, and then I was on the A team, A-403 for a while. But
Okay.
we were at Chilang, my recollection, Chilang and Chow Duck, and out near the Seven Sisters on the border, kept going back and forth across the border. We got attacked I'm trying to remember, Easter Sunday in March of 1970s, where the our camp got attacked. And I can't remember if it was at Chilang or it was at Chow Duck, very candidly. Memory is a funny thing. You lose it pretty quick.
Well, B40, you were the S3 assistant.
I was assistant S3 at B40, and then I was the XO at 403.
But that was 403 was earlier. But by March of 1970, I have you down, and the roster has you down as the advisor to the Vietnamese Special Forces Camp A-149.
That doesn't sound familiar to me. I think I was the assistant S3 at B40.
Maybe you had a second hat that you weren't even aware of as the assistant S3. Let me go over here, share the screen, and okay. Gary Meade is not on here. He would have been the guy who succeeded you in that post. But the camp was turned over to Vietnamese Special Forces in '67. And then we have a series of senior advisors that were responsible for it. Now, whether they are on station or not, that's another question. Meade is considered to be an LNO.
A-149, I don't know that was a U.S. camp. I think that was a...
It was not. It was Vietnamese.
It was LLDB.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah,
Captain Nam was the LLDB CEO there.
All right, let me do this here. Maybe that'll bring back some memories. This is the camp, very close to the border.
yeah.
And then it had an outpost I'm not sure what the outpost was called.
Jantan.
Shantan?
Yeah,
I don't see that here on the map.
it was way to the left on that screen. In fact, it was right on the border.
Okay.
You're getting close.
That's,
That double line is a canal. And
this is the canal, the Vinte Canal.
that's what
Yeah,
we took to
that's
be
the
the
border.
border. That's what we took to be-
Jantan was where the border came down and actually hit that canal.
Okay. I'll have to look that up.
Jantan was on the canal and on the border.
we assumed that to be the canal, but nobody knew for sure where the border was. I think we thought it might be a couple of 100 meters south of it. We didn't, nobody knew for sure.
Well, I'll have to put up a different map sheet at some other time.
I was at Vinh Jaw where that little green arrow was. That's where I was. And if I remember correctly, Chow Duck was west of there. We had a common line there dividing our AOs. You were in up seven mountains area, and we were right close to it.
Yeah. For practical purposes, it was under B-42, but B-42 basically closed itself down in about the same time that the camp was turned over.
B-42 was that Canto?
No, that C4 was Canto. B-42 was chowed up,
Okay.
I think. All right, now let me stop the share here. We don't have at this moment anybody here who is really there from the early period of time, but Seth Cattell was the son of the XO who was there in 1965 to 66.
I was at Vinh Jaw in 64, 65.
And
Who
I
was
was
that?
there in 66 and 67.
Okay, who, Don, you were
Yeah, I was there in 64.
64.
We took over the camp from a team from Okinawa.
Okay, yes.
And built most of it. We continued the building.
Okay. Let's see, share the screen. Okay. So you came over on Bowser's team.
Yep.
Okay. So there you are over here. Let me stop that sharing. So you are the earliest one here. Why don't you start telling us about how you came into the camp and what all was involved in the takeover?
Well, the story about wasn't too much to tell about the takeover. We just moved in, and the team from the first moved on out. We had about a 2 hour overlap there. They had built most of the camp. It was all of the defenses were out, and the wall was completely built. Had I believe 4 or 5 buildings, and it was in the middle of the rice paddy, of course. So we had little bridges going from one building to the other all around the camp, and we lived in in the middle of a rice paddy basically. I think maybe the most interesting part of the story of my team was I was in the 5th group at Bragg, and I went to the 5th group right straight out of the training group, and we were in B company of the 5th group, and we went into mission training for a 6-month TDY mission. At that time, we were, they were alternating 6 months when Alpha Company got back, B Company went, and so forth. And it was turn around 6 months. We got about halfway through our mission training, and CO of the group called us all up to whatever the name of that gym was. It was up the road a ways. Got the whole group in there and informed us that the U.S. Army had decided to PCS the entire group to NAM, so we would be going for 12 months with no TDY pay instead of 6 months with it. And that was quite a big disappointment to everybody financially. But we went ahead and took off in September of '64. We were one of 12 A teams in the initial movement, along with the headquarters of the group. We moved over to Vietnam with the group colors, and that was in September '64.
This is your orders to go there on the screen now.
Wow.
I don't have the team picture.
I don't remember we took a whole lot of pictures. We were busy doing other stuff.
Well, the B team has had a picture,
Well,
and
they weren't very busy.
and most of the A teams had pictures. I just didn't happen to get the picture from your team. These were taken at Fort Bragg before you left.
I don't ever remember taking one.
In any event, your team missed out somehow.
Yeah.
Or at least I missed out in getting that picture. But we were pretty young at that time, I think. We wouldn't recognize each other today.
No, probably not.
Did you spend the full year there at Vinja?
No, I was there about 6 months, and I think it was about February '65. They moved me up to the B team, and I finished out my 12 months as a radio operator to B team.
All right. Well, they swapped people out after 6 months so they wouldn't lose a whole team. But before you left there, I believe Seth, your father, showed up as the XO.
Yeah, so I was just looking at the document you had. And hello, guys. Thank you for letting me be part of this. You know, deeply appreciate it. He came sometime in mid '65. He had been in Tin Bin beforehand, but the way he talks about this, he talked about this camp. He died several years ago. Is that there were many more Vietnamese, either irregulars or others, and much fewer Americans. So there was like a different sense of being more on your own. He also told me a story. It was interesting to see the map because he said there was at least one time when they had to go across the border, you know, in somewhat far, and they found like a VC camp or a storage area, and they found some stores and weaponry and propaganda stuff, and they actually got chased out. He always thought by aircraft. People were always kind of denied that to him or subsequently, but that was one of the big, you know, kind of military aspects to that he would talk about. Then much less significantly towards the end of his time in that camp, there was some sort of friendly fire with the local fishermen, that, you know, caused, you know, sort of like whatever they were doing on the PSYOPs front, yeah, it was counterproductive. So that was sort of a couple of the big, you know, memories that he conveyed to me that I'm happy to, you know, share. So thanks again.
The interesting thing talking about the border, you can look at a map and see the border, but when you're on the ground, there was no line and there was no fence. And we operated, my recollection is we went where the mission carried it. And we were on both sides of the border more often than not. just because you were chasing somebody or you're looking for intel or something like that. And people, we talk about the border now in the context of our southern border, and we got a fence or a river and all
Right.
that. There was no line on the ground that demarked anything back then. And it was a lot freer action and movement. And again, it's amazing times just thinking about what we did back then. And if you weren't there, you didn't have a real good appreciation for it.
Unfortunately, the Cambodian border was a very sensitive political issue,
Yep.
especially Sihanouk and the State Department, who had always hoped to get Sihanouk back in their good graces, or get back in Sihanouk's good graces. The biggest problem that I don't think really applies much in 1965, but certainly did in later times, is if you were across the border and you were not on a mission that had been designated by SOG, who had the only authority to be on the other side of the border, you could very likely get hit by our own planes. So that presented a problem, mostly up in 2 Corps, but even down in 4 Corps, that could have presented a problem, because every day SOG sent had a guy in NKP, and he would look at the board over there, and he'd say, "Don't do that arc light." He wouldn't say why, he wouldn't say anything, but his job was to say, "Don't do that arc light." And that's because he had a team in that box. So if you were, say, a Marine Force recon unit running across the border for one reason or another, there was nobody to protect you from that arc light that was scheduled for that box. Now, when the time Terry was there in 1970, especially after April of 70, Sihanouk was overthrown, and there was a fair amount of flexibility on that border. But prior to that, any incursion on the border was usually met by some protest by the Cambodians. Sihanouk was a little bit nicer on that starting in 69, when he said, as long as you kill Vietnamese, that's okay, but don't kill any Cambodians.
Well, it's interesting also, my recollection of the B-40 Mike Force, most of them were Cambodians. Most of our soldiers, we had the LLDB cadre, Vietnamese cadre, but most of the soldiers and all their camp followers were all Cambodian.
Well, there were a lot of Cambodians living in the Delta, and there were multiple groups of Cambodians. There was a KKK in the Khmer Sarai, and there was a Khmer Issarai, and they all had different status vis-a-vis Cambodia itself. The KKK, in fact, their name derives from the fact that they were trying to recover Lower Cambodia back to the control of Cambodia.
Yeah, and there was no love lost between the Vietnamese and the Cambodians.
Definitely not.
The cadre of the LLDB, they were very worried every time we'd get in firefights that some of the soldiers would kill them. There was no love lost at all between the Vietnamese and the Cambodians.
At Vinh, we had a company of Cambodians and a company of Vietnamese. And we spent a good deal of time exercising diplomacy between the two of them.
Right.
And keeping them separate.
Yeah. I wanted to say something about what Seth was saying. I guess you're talking about your dad, if I understood that correctly, Seth. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, that was my dad's name was Gerald Gittell.
Yeah. I didn't know him. He was there at a different time.
He was the XO starting in about September of 65.
Sometime after I transferred back up to the C team, would have been in early 65, the team at Benja ran a mission over into Cambodia. It sounded like it might have been the same one you're talking about, Seth, and made contact with a group much larger than they were. At that time, we didn't have to worry about aircraft because there was 2 A-1Es in the entire AO, and that was total air support. And if we saw them once a month somewhere, we were very, very lucky. But they got ran out, like you said, and the team leader, team sergeant, John Hale, lost his left eye, and the weapons man, Claxton Thomas, took a round in the chest. They both got out and they both survived, and they both continued to retire. John wore an eye patch the rest of his time in the military. That happened, like I say, in early '65 sometime.
Dick, when did you show up?
I showed up, as a matter of fact, tomorrow is my anniversary for arriving there in 1966. And I was there from July of 1966 through May or June of 1967, when we turned the camp over to the LLDB, Detachment 149 of the LLDB. So I was there basically for about a year during 66, 67. And I remember the outpost at Jantan because I hated it. It was extremely boring duty, despite the fact that it was right on the border. And we didn't have much activity there until Christmas time of 1966, when Intel said that the VC were going to attack and overrun Jantan. And at that time, we had 2 Americans in the outpost, and we were so far away from Vinja that we couldn't get any support from them. And we knew that if we needed support, it would take forever to get in there. So we figured we were goners. And the medic who was there with me and we signed a suicide pact where we figured if one of us survived and the other was badly wounded, we'd make sure to take care of them and then take care of ourselves. But that was kind of a scary time. It was the only scary time, well, one of very few scary times I had at Vinja.
Dick has been very prolific in the last few years. He's written a series of books. This is number 4, which discusses Vinja in some detail. And
Is that a Rat Express, or is that something else?
say
Is that
again?
what?
Is that your publishing company, or who you know?
My publisher is Amazon.
That book available on Amazon?
It
Right.
is under
There's
Slurp Sands.
There's a link to it from my website.
Slurp said.
And that the one dealing with Vinja is number 4
Okay,
of the series.
that's good. That's good information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it talks all about my time at Vinja, as well as my time when we closed down Vinja in June of 1967. I only had a couple months remaining till DROS, and I was transferred to the B team at Chow Duck, where I spent an extremely boring month. As a radio operator there. I was a demo man at Vinja, but I had cross-trained in radio operations, And I went there with Smitty, who was our radio operator supervisor at Vinja. And I spent a month there before I finally cried enough where they transferred me to Baswai for my final month in country.
Yeah.
And Baswai was an interesting place. Being in a spot where you looked up at where the VC were in the Seven Mountains.
Yeah.
And you wondered when you were going to get fired on. But Vinja was kind of a quiet camp. I had a few times that were extremely scary, but generally Vinja was very quiet.
It was pretty quiet. When I was there also, we didn't have a whole lot of action. We ran ambush patrols and we were limited in what we could do because when I first got there, the only means of travel we had was sampan.
Yeah.
And later on, we got a couple of airboats, and that was nice. But we were able to exercise a little bit more control over the area when we had that mobility.
Yeah, we had some of those engineer assault boats when I was at Vinja. I always wished that we would gotten airboats because that would have made it for a quick reply to any action there. But we never got the airboats when I was there.
I don't know what happened to them. Maybe they got shot up.
Yeah.
We had two of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I had another time that I was scared to death, and that time we were on a sampan. It was during the rainy season. During the rainy season, everything was underwater at Vinja.
Yeah.
We did a lot of wading, including in the team house.
Yeah.
The water was about a foot deep in the team house during the monsoon season. And I still remember one boat patrol I went out on close to the border, and it was a night ambush. Well, they saw us, we didn't see them, and they fired on us, and I figured they were also firing on us with mortars, and I knew getting in the water when a mortar exploded was not a good place to be.
Yeah.
So we hung on to the sampans and tried to get the hell out of there as quickly as possible. But that was the scariest operation that I had at Vinja. All in all, it was an interesting time. We had a commanding officer there. What was his name? Captain Morris, who I dearly loved. In fact, he and I still maintain communications, although I haven't heard from him in a while. I'm thinking maybe he finally is deceased.
No, he's still alive, but he doesn't have internet.
Pardon?
He's still alive, but he doesn't have internet. He's in Texas.
How do you spell that name?
Yeah. Yeah, he was a great guy. In fact, he always called me by my nickname, by the way, is Slurp. That's where the name of the book comes from, Slurp Sends, because I'd always sign off on radio communications with Slurp Sends. And Captain Morris knew about my nickname, and he'd always, rather than saying, "Hey, Staff Sergeant James, how about doing this?" he'd say, "Hey, Slurp." And I found out that he hated the song, what was it? I forget the song offhand now, but I loved to sing it because I knew that he hated it. And he'd always react to it. And his reaction was, "Slurp, you better quit singing that right now. I'm going to send you on a one-man patrol into Cambodia."
How do you spell his name, sir? How do you spell his name?
Morris, Morris, Alvin.
Morris. Okay.
Yeah. Alvin B as in Buff Morris. His nickname was Buff, B-U-F-F.
Okay. I thought you said Mora. I knew a Mora at Bad
No.
Coke. I thought it was him.
No, it was Morris. And one time he was, not only did we have problems with the border itself, we had problems with the dividing lines between districts in Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, there weren't any fences.
this one time we were on a patrol, and Captain Morris was the leader on the patrol. I was back in camp listening to the radio communications, and he got into a fight with a VC, and he had them on the run. And it was one of the few times that we actually had FAC overhead to help out. And this FAC pilot came out and said, you're nearing the district line. You need to get permission before you cross the line. And at that time, Captain Morris said, say again, I can't hear you. And he continued saying that while that FAC pilot was telling him he needed to get permission. And Captain Morris was just acting like he couldn't hear what he was saying and continued to march. And that was the kind of a guy Captain Morris was. When he went into Canto, in fact, he'd always go to the NCO club rather than the officers club. And he got into a verbal argument with the sergeant major there one time and told the sergeant major to just clam up, that he was going to be there drinking with his men, that he was not going to go to the officers club. So he was an NCO's dream as far as we were concerned.
Have any of you guys ever heard of Major John Arm?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Arnold was the B detachment commander who got killed on his tour over there.
When was that?
That was in 65, I think.
So that's okay.
You actually cover between Don and Seth and Dick that period of time, a short period of time, that the Special Forces was in charge of that camp or running that camp to some extent.
Yeah.
Terry's not admitting the fact that he had something to do with the advisory effort on it. But the history of D Company has a lot to say in the later years, 68, 69, 70, and including what happened at Ninja, which had a fair amount of activity in it. And there were also some classified projects that were involved. I don't know if any of them go back to that early period of time, but they had at some camps, because of the relationship and closeness to the border, they had searchlights, they had radar systems. Project Duffel Bag was an and then there's a Project Sonia that was an anti-intrusion project that they put on there. Are any of you familiar with any of that? Was anything going on early on?
No, we didn't have any of that at all there. We were very primitive.
Okay. And Terry, none of those ring a bell with you.
None of them do, no.
Okay. The fact that they turned the camp over to the LLDB and continued to support the team, and the team sort of lasted a long time. They turned over to Border Rangers, and they continued on to almost 1973, at which point the LLDB in Full Corps was unnecessary, or the CIDG in Full Corps was unnecessary, and they shipped them all out as Ranger battalions to other Corps areas. But what surprised me is the longevity of the LLDB in that camp, with all the problems between Vietnamese and Cambodians and the propensity of the Vietnamese LLDB to rip off the CIDG. When they're on their own, they had to survive. They had to deal with the people that they had been ripping off without protection from the U.S. Special Forces.
Right.
You have any comments on how they managed to do that at Vinja?
Well, number one, at Vinja, when I was there, I don't remember any Cambodians. I think the Cambodians were probably shipped off. The entire LLDB team, I'm pretty sure or the entire CIDG was Vietnamese rather than Cambodians. Now that changed when I went to Ba Soi. At Ba Soi, all the CIDG were Cambodians, and the LLDB were the only Vietnamese there, and that caused a major problem at Ba Soi. But I don't remember having that problem ever at Vinja.
Well, I'm looking down here, and I'm finding that when you were at Ba Soi, or Vinja rather, the Captain Nam
Yeah,
was Vietnamese commander.
he was.
When Don was there was a Captain Nia that was there. I had to go find out what the dividing point was, but it appears that Nam was there for a very long time.
Oh, he was.
Long after the camp was converted over.
Yeah, he ruled with an iron hand. And we always figured when we left, he had a big smile on his face when he waved at us. I've got a photograph of him when he waved at us from the dock as we headed north to Chow Duck on the Vinh Tay Canal. And he had a major big smile on his face, and we all figured, oh yeah, he's glad because now he can get all the money he wants to from the paymaster, and line his pockets with all sorts of cash.
Well, it's really a wonder to me that the LLDB didn't get killed after the Americans left, because they had been ripping people off so much.
Yeah,
But Nam is there until 1969, when
Yeah.
Lieutenant Doc took over.
uh-huh.
Steve, do you
That
know,
name sounds familiar to me too, Doc.
Doc.
Yeah.
So, that was a surprise. Dick,
Yeah.
take over.
Okay. What can I? Oh yeah, the border there at Jantan. Speaking of that, the border was right across the canal. We could throw a rock into Cambodia, and that's why one of the reasons I hated that location was because I knew if a VC attacked from the Cambodian side, we would not get any air support because the air support would have to fly over Cambodia. And the US Air Force refused to do that. So that made me scared right there, knowing that there'd be no support coming in to our camp, because it was kind of on a corner of Western Vietnam, on the very corner where the border just went right along that canal. And there was no way that any support aircraft would be able to fly over it without flying into neutral airspace, which was forbidden at the time. I know that when I was at Kai Kai, we had the Cambodian outpost right across the border from us, about 1,500 meters or 2,000 meters north of camp. And we were never able to get air support to fire on that Cambodian outpost. It didn't happen until about, I think, 2 years after I left, that they finally got sick and tired of the Cambodian outpost constantly firing on our camp at Kai Kai, and they leveled the outpost with from what I understand was B-52 bombings. But at Vinja, at the outpost there, we didn't expect that to happen at all.
Some of the interesting stories I've heard was about the eating facilities at the various camps. Some camps had really good cooks. They even managed to take some hotshot cooks out of Saigon hotels. Some of them had some mama-san doing some terrible things to the food. What was your experience in that area, Don?
We had two Vietnamese cooks, Bucky and Ho. I've often wondered what happened to them. They were very loyal and they were good cooks. I don't know. I don't think I ever queried them about where they got their expertise, but they were good cooks. And we would, one man from the B team, from our team, about every 3 weeks would go into Saigon and buy groceries and bring them back out. And Bucky and Ho kept us very, very well fed between what we could bring from Saigon and a water buffalo every once in a while, and a pig now and then. We ate very well. No complaints.
Dick, were they still there when you came?
No, we had a mama-san that was our main cook, and she did okay, but it was during the second half of my time there that we ate really well. At that time, Sergeant Smith, James Smith, who was our radio operator, and he was our scrounger. He was the most excellent scrounger I ever ran across in all of Vietnam. He could go to Saigon. And by the way, we had a seamstress in the village who sewed up VC flags for us. And when he didn't take VC flags in for trading purposes, quote unquote, captured VC flags, that were all messed up, we would anytime we had a contact with the enemy, we would always claim a carbine as lost in action. And he would take that carbine in and trade it off as a captured VC weapon. And he was able to trade off some unknown stuff, and he kept trading. He not only traded for the food, but he traded for something else and traded that for more food. In fact, he was caught one time on the docks of Saigon unloading air conditioning units. And an officer found him doing it and said, "If you put those back where you found them, I will not turn you in." So he was lucky on that one. And one time he traded for a 50 caliber machine gun, because we were without a 50 caliber machine gun for the longest time. It wasn't until towards the end of my tour there that we finally got a 50 caliber for the observation tower. And I don't know what he traded for that. Then there was another time that he had traded for so much stuff that we had to get a a Jolly Green Giant to bring it in, because we didn't have an airstrip at Vinja. All we had to get into Vinja was helicopter or boat, because there were no roads leading to Vinja either. So helicopter or boat it was. And that Jolly Green Giant was the best way to bring it in, even though Jolly Greens were not permitted in that area of South Vietnam because of apparently the danger of being shot down. And he was able to get a Jolly Green to bring in everything he had traded for. And then another time, I forget who it was able to purchase a live cow. Nobody in the camp knew anything about raising cattle. I was assigned to be the ranch man. And I know and knew nothing about doing that. So I just turned it over to our mama-san, who was in charge of taking care of that cow until we finally decided to kill it and eat it. But that was my story about food at Vinja. It was really something else.
I suspect that Special Forces employees produced more VC flags than the VC did.
Most likely, yeah.
That wouldn't be surprised.
To this day, I wonder when I hear somebody talk about a captured VC flag if it really is or not. And I doubt that it is.
You're right to be suspicious.
Yeah.
The cow sounds like part of the Civic Action Program. Up in Tukor, we had cows that were delivered as live food for the camps.
Yeah.
We had airstrips, however, to deliver the cows with, although sometimes the cows got low-lexed in there, and that didn't do much for their
Yeah.
They're ready to butcher when they hit the ground.
Yeah.
But there were camps that maintained whole herds of cows, and up in northern Tukor, rustling was a problem because the VC would come to steal the cows, or somebody would come to steal the cows, and they were protecting against that. But you don't sound like you had a big inventory of cows.
Oh no, there weren't any cows in the area. I have no idea where they got this cow.
Camp Goodman in Saigon did a good job of procuring things like that.
Yeah.
If you wanted to order a cow, you could get one.
Right. Yeah, and we had a lot of med caps go out of Vinja. That's one thing we were well known for was running med caps, medical patrols.
And we did a lot of that when I was there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Lolex, that brought back when you talking about getting food back into Vinja, we did get a couple of Lolexes from Caribou a couple of times while I was there. We had that. There was that bank between the rice paddies and the canal. It was about 30 feet wide or something like that.
Yeah.
And we got a couple of Lolexes along that bank a couple of times.
They're pretty good. They dropped it that small a width.
They put it right in there. Yeah. Of course, the Caribou only flew 10 miles an hour. So.
I got a story, not about food, but I'm amazed at your memories for things that happened 50, 65 years ago. I'm not sure I could tell you what I had for breakfast yesterday, but you guys are remembering things way back when. But I have one memory about a prayer. You know, I was XO of the A team and involved with the B team. And every month we had to go back to Canto to get the money to pay the soldiers because they got paid in cash, piastres. And when I'd go back to camp, I'd get a waterproof bag filled with piastres. And then I get another waterproof bag filled with secret and top secret documents, all the codes. And I'd sling that over my shoulder. And often I either flew back in a Caribou or an O-1E. And I was pretty young and inexperienced way back when. Still inexperienced, but not so young anymore. But the prayer that we used to say when we were flying back to camp with these two waterproof bags was, please, Lord, if we're shot down, let me be killed, because I don't want to have to fill out the paperwork for this stuff in my bags. I have that memory sitting there with $200,000 or $300,000 worth of piastres on the table. And each CIDG soldier would come up and check off his name, and he'd put his mark, and I'd hand him a handful of piastres. My recollection is the exchange rate was something like 120 piastres to $1 way back when.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I have such a great memory of my time in Vietnam, as well as my time in Ethiopia on a mission there in '64, is because my mother told me to write home regularly. And I wrote home about once a week. And she said, don't leave anything out. And in fact, the reason I remember that is because on my first patrol out of Kai Kai in Vietnam, I stepped on a mine that had been planted just a silly millimeter too low. It didn't go off, but the Vietnamese behind me came up, tapped me on the shoulder, took me back and showed me my boot print over that pressure plate on the mine. And so I remember that, and I wrote home about it because I remembered her saying, don't leave anything out. So I wrote all about it, which had to have scared the crap out of her. But my mother saved all those letters. And I have every single one of those letters in my hand right now. That's why I was able to write that series of books, because I wrote home about what I was doing constantly. And my mother kept those. So I have those as a memory.
Very lucky. Very
Yeah.
lucky.
Sound like God was saving you to write those books.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in fact, I wasn't in the process of writing books. What I was doing when I started out on this was I wanted to make a record of what I did during my lifetime for my children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren to see. And somebody told me, you need to write a book. And that's where it came out. And one book turned into 4. So, and I had an editor that was fantastic. She did a great job on all my books. And a pre-publisher who did a great job also.
Yeah.
So
Did all you guys stay in SF after your Vietnam experience, or did you get out for a career?
I wish I could have, but back in the late 60s and early 70s, I mean, I went to OCS when I was 18. I was a second lieutenant at 19. When I became captain at 21, I was the youngest captain in the Army. And as you know, SF for the officer corps wasn't considered career enhancing. And now it's a branch, and it's a little more respected.
Oh, yeah.
But back then, that was a black mark on your record. And I ended up going into leg infantry, stayed in infantry, but went into leg infantry and staff assignments and stuff. I had a 6-year tour in Europe. Didn't get selected for lieutenant colonel. I retired as a major. Still lucky. I retired at 38, so I was still pretty lucky in the big picture. In fact, still kicking now, but I wish I had been able to stay in special forces. That was still the best training and the best soldiers I ever served with over the years. And I was very young, and when I went in, and I learned an awful lot, and I was smart enough to grab some good non-commissioned officers and have them help train me.
Yeah.
So no, I couldn't stay in special forces, and I regret that, but you can't go back and change history.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only reason I got out was because after Vietnam, I did an extended tour in Vietnam, 1.5 years, and I came back stateside, and they were permitting second lieutenants right off the street into SF at the time. And I ran across some of those officers, and I thought, oh man, this is going to be the death of me. In fact, one time at Fort Bragg, I saw this second lieutenant chew out a sergeant major. And I thought, holy shit, this guy is really asking for it. And I decided to throw 6 years of SF out and got out of the military and pursued an airline pilot career because using the GI Bill. I never became an airline pilot, but I became a civilian flight instructor before my medical history caught up with me. And I got a bunch of blood clots. And when I was put on blood thinning medication, the FAA said, well, with you being on that blood thinning medication, you can no longer fly. So I bounced around bartender jobs and other jobs, and then finally a mail carrier with the Postal Service, retired on disability from the Postal Service.
I think I was one of those second lieutenants, although I went to Vietnam, I've been promoted to first lieutenant, and I learned my lesson that the best thing a lieutenant learns is how to respect his NCOs. I had been in a PSYOP unit at Fort Bragg and was on orders to go to Thailand. And my sergeant major came over and said, would you like to tell your kids that you spent the war in Thailand? He didn't mention fucking your brains out. Or would you rather say you were in special forces? And I said, oh, special forces, of course. And I'd taken all of the coursework and participated in the FDX. So I had a 3 prefix, and I went over there as a 39305 PSYOPs officer, and enjoyed the hell out of my tour until the last 3 months when they decided they wanted to replace me with a captain. They brought me down to the Trang to be the plans officer to write everything up. And they got a new guy taking over the S5. They say in the military, you always run into one idiot sometime in your career.
Just one?
Yeah, I say you're lucky if it's just one.
If it doesn't happen until you're 30 years in the military, then you have a good career. If it happens in your first tour, that's it.
Yeah.
And I ran into him in my first tour. I was prepared to extend because his predecessor said, if I come to the Trang, spend 3 months in the Trang, will be promoted to captain, and I can extend and go back to play 2. And this guy told me, the Army doesn't tell you where, you don't go tell the Army where you want to go. The Army tells you. They said, the Army tells me I'm leaving here in 3 months, so I'll do that. That was the worst 3 months of my military career, the only bad part of it. And I made up for it in later years, even with a particular individual.
I can thank Mrs. Alexander for my time in Vietnam.
Oh, that was a sweet lady.
She saved my butt a couple of times. The first time was when I was in the 6th Special Forces group and I had gone through atomic demolition training. And after a graduation, the Army, in its infinite wisdom, ordered me to go to Alaska to a leg atomic demolition unit there. And I called up Mrs. Alexander and I said, can they do this to me? And she said, no way. She said, within a week, I'll have your orders changed. And sure enough, she changed my orders. And then the next time was when I was in the 3rd Special Forces group, and they put me on orders for Panama. I didn't want to go to Panama. And besides, I had heard that a good friend of mine from training group had been captured and executed by the Viet Cong for no reason. And I called her up and I said, I want to volunteer for Vietnam. The sooner you can get me there, the better. And she took care of that. Within a couple of weeks, I had orders to start my pre-deployment training with the 7th group and go over to Nam. So she saved my butt a couple of times.
Yeah.
Funny, if your wish list was to go to Vietnam, and usually it was readily accepted.
Yeah. Yeah, I volunteered for Vietnam when I was in the 3rd, and they denied it. They said, we can't afford to let you go. That they were understaffed. And speaking of understaffed, Vinja was so understaffed by the time we turned it over. It was unbelievable. We had maybe about, at the most 9 guys on the team, and 2 of them always had to be a Jantan. So that meant 7 guys in camp to run the camp. And at times we had less than that because of R&Rs. So we were always hurting when it came to the amount of men on the team.
Don, did you remain in Special Forces, Don?
I did mostly. After I left Vietnam, I went to the 7th, and I was in the 7th for 2.5 years, I think. Not my doing. I was promoted to sergeant first class not too long after I got back from Vietnam, and at that time I would have had to spend it would take me another 5 years to be eligible for master sergeant, because I was promoted to SFC, was just 3 days over the minimum required service. And I decided I didn't want to wait around for 5 years for another promotion, so I put in for OCS and went to OCS in '68. But as soon as I got to that application into OCS, of course, my file was flagged and I couldn't go anywhere. I tried to get to Ranger School, I tried to get to Halo School, I tried to get to Scuba School. They wouldn't send me anywhere because they were afraid my orders for OCS would come while I was gone. So I hung out in the 7th and we ran a lot of training missions all over the eastern states for that period of time. But speaking of lieutenants, like we were a while ago, at that time, the SFOC was cranking out newly quote unquote qualified lieutenants like crazy. And you couldn't turn around without tripping over a second lieutenant. And about each of the A teams in the Delta Company 7th had about 3 or 4 second lieutenants attached to it. And we used them to carry the generator and whatever other shit jobs we could find and try to pump as much education as we could into them. And I think that might have, without it ever having been recorded anywhere or quantified, might have been one of the more important things that Delta Company 7th accomplished during that period of time. There was a whole bunch of NCOs educating a whole bunch of second lieutenants on the way to Vietnam.
I was probably one of those back then.
Might
I
very
was
well
in the
be.
7th,
Is that right?
68. Yep.
Yeah. Thing I regret the most about being an OCS in 68 was I missed out. That was the most active year in Vietnam. And I regret that I wasn't there during that period of time. But God, like I told Dick a minute ago, God was saving me for something else. I got out of CS and I went to the 82nd because I wanted to get my ticket punched as a platoon leader. But the G3 spotted me while I was waiting for an assignment there at headquarters and decided that somebody with my experience would be wasted in a platoon. So I wound up running the 82nd Airborne Division Raider School for about 8 months until I went back to Vietnam. When I went back to Vietnam, of course, I had my choice of units because of my second tour. I put in for the 101st because I still wanted to run a platoon. They gave me my second choice and sent me back to 5th Group. So I spent another tour as an officer in 5th, and then came back, went to the Bad Toll SF for 3 years there, and got a leave of absence to go back to college to get my final year for a degree. And about 2 weeks before I graduated from Campbell College, got a letter from the Department of the Army saying you're being reduced in force back to Sergeant First Class because you don't have a college education. Just too weeks short of graduating. So then I got a job as at that time, you may recall that they added an SF NCO slot to each one of the ROTC units all over the country at the colleges. And so I got a job at Penn State with filling the NCO slot there as an SF sergeant. Had a very, very, very productive year there, 5 years there. I stayed there 5 years at Penn State and converted a whole bunch of kids off the street into officers. And that might have been the most, probably the most important thing that I did in my career. A lot of those, some of those guys are still staying in touch with me. They're all retired colonels now. And, so I had a kind of a spotty career all over. Made master sergeant while I was at Penn State, and just about the same time I made master sergeant, I got promoted to major in the reserves. So when I got ready to retire, I wrote a letter to the Department of the Army asking, what am I supposed to call myself, sergeant or major? And they said, you can call yourself a major. So, so that's what I are.
It was interesting about the ROTC slide. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
Every ROTC unit had an SF NCO.
Yeah.
Was a jump qualified slot.
No, I never did get to jump anymore.
Oh, that was not nice of them.
No, missed that.
But if somebody at JFK Center had enough sense to see the potential of recruiting through the ROTC.
I don't know who came up with that, but that was a good thing.
Sure.
Steve, let me just fill these guys in a little bit on my dad post-war. So he didn't stay in. He had a brief stint in a internationally focused government agency before I was born. But when I was around, that wasn't there. But one of the things that was interesting with him was that when he was at Fort Bragg, he actually met Sergeant Barry Sadler and recorded a song that Sadler had on bass. Then he goes to Vietnam and is in, Vinh and everything. And when he comes back from Vietnam, he sees Sadler on television, and the Ballad of the Green Berets became the #1 song of 1966. So we always felt that was like a, sort of a comms, type of thing that he had helped accomplish for special forces in popularizing the unit.
When I was after I left Vinh, I went up to the C team as a radio operator. We had a lot of spare time on our hands. I think I was working something like it was an 8 on and 24 off or something like that shift in the radio shack. And with all that off time, I got a job tending bar in the club, and did that for the rest of the time I was at Canto until I came back to the States. But while I was tending bar in the club, Sadler came in one time. He was on his way through going on R&R or something, and I spent a couple of days there with his guitar. And that was before he recorded it, before anybody knew him. And he sang a whole lot of songs besides the Battle of the Green Beret.
Yeah.
He's a very entertaining guy. I guess he's dead now, isn't he?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
he's been gone. He's been gone since the 80s.
I'm surprised to hear that he was in 4-Corps because he spent his time up in 2-Corps, really.
Did he?
When I was in 2-Corps in 68 and early 69, I remember Maggie Ray used to come by and we sit and play poker with her. She was a hell of a poker player.
Was she?
Oh, yeah.
She was a hell of a lots of things.
Yeah.
Hell of a vodka drinker too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. She could put it down with the best of them. Another memory, you start talking about famous people. When I was in OCS in 67, they were making the John Wayne movie about the Green Berets at Fort Benning. And I had a couple of classmates in OCS. They were prior SF, married Vietnamese women, and had children. And these were NCOs going to OCS, and their children were extras in the movie that they were making at Fort Benning at the time. Just interesting experiences we had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, one of the guys that I knew from Special Forces, Sergeant Nielsen, was one of the guys who was on that A team that they put on the podium for the movie.
I knew a Sergeant Nielsen in B Company, the 5th group, before we went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Don't remember what his first name was.
Paul, have I got you down here for this session, or are you here for the next one?
Well, I'm here for, I think Vinjai's going to be on this one.
Yeah.
You're in my spot.
Vinjai, this is Vinjai, right?
Yeah.
What were you doing at Vinjai and when?
Well, Vinjai A-149, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That used to belong to B-43.
Yeah.
And I paid Vinjai. I was the funds officer out of B-43, and I would go to Vinjai and then go down that Vente Canal with a sack full of money and pay those 2 FOBs. And we did that in just a rather small boat, with the only real security was a boat in front and a boat in the back, and me in the middle with a mail bag full of piastra. Yeah, but that one FOB at the end,
John Ton.
well, that thing set up in Cambodia, didn't it?
Yeah, it was right on the border.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was just me and an interpreter. And, it was just some interesting time sitting there. You didn't want to argue too much about when they came up and tried to get all the extra pay for the guys that died, and the survivors benefits and all that. But that was some interesting trips. And there was a captain there, by the way, I think, Daiwi Nam,
Nam, yeah,
Nam.
yep,
Was a pretty good guy.
yeah. He knew his shit.
Yeah. And I just wonder what happened to him, that I went out on some operations with them. The SEAL team was there for a while with PBRs and operated on that canal. But that was just interesting times.
What years were you doing that?
69 and 70. When were you there?
That's my dad. Steve let me go. My dad's deceased. So my dad was Gerald Gittell. He was there in 1965. So I'm just listening in.
Oh, and in 65, I think Vinh, I'm not sure when we turned that camp over. It
was in August, or no, pardon me, June of 1967, because I was there.
So
we turned
I
the
wonder
camp
where
over.
you were, because if you were there before or after me. So you were there before me.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah,
was
I was there for a year before that. In fact, today is my anniversary for actually going to Vinja in 1966.
Where was the B team at that time?
That was Chow Duck, B-42.
B-42 was at Chow Duck?
Yeah.
So we had an A team at Chow Duck.
No,
No?
no. They had, B-42 was a very short-lived A team. It closed down about the same time that the camp was turned over. The other camp was turned over. Vinja was turned over.
Well, what was the name of that camp that sat right on the Mekong?
Tin Bin?
What?
That was Kowloon. Kowloon was B-43 on the Mekong.
Well, Kowloon was at, I was at Kowloon.
Right.
No, this was.
Chow Duck was also there, but its time was a little different here.
I thought they moved an A team there under B-43.
Not in Kowloon. Dick?
Call from unavailable.
Hello?
Yeah, I don't,
Yes, speak.
I wasn't there then, so I'm not familiar with an A team being at
What
Chow
are you
Duck.
talking about?
Well, they had an A team up there.
Okay. I know there were a bunch of A teams around the vicinity of Chow Duck, but I don't remember seeing anything about an A team at Chow Duck.
Yeah, I'm trying. Memory's not what it was, but we had Baswai, Hatien.
Yeah, Chow Duck had these three teams over here. Are you not seeing what I've got here? Let me put that on screen share.
But it also had Tin Bin.
Okay, Baswai had three teams, or Chow Duck had three teams. And it was closed. Let's see. Swin 768, a year after Vinja was closed. This
Can
camp
you
was
put
closed.
that B-43 group up there again?
Okay.
Okay. Kai.
Oh, let me move before.
Tung Toi.
Hold on.
Mida.
Okay. So B-43 is Kai, Tung Toi, and Mian Mida.
Okay.
Okay.
Tung Toi was the name of that camp up there.
Tung Toi was on the other side of the Mekong.
Yeah. Yeah. Tung Toi. Kai was an interesting camp. That thing, wow.
Yeah, I spent about 6 months at Kai Kai.
Yeah. What a year.
I had a good friend of mine, Red Pruitt, who was killed at Kai Kai in 65.
Oh, my.
I don't know whether any of you ever knew him or not.
No. I got there after that. Hey, is that Terry Fox up there? That was.
That's
Were
who
you-
it is.
Were you
Terry?
with B-40 Mike Force?
Yeah. 69 and 70. Did we serve together, Paul?
Yeah, we sure did. We went to some Army schools or something together, and I think we terrorized Baltimore one night.
Oh, shit. I had, oh, no.
Don't talk too loud. My wife's in the other room.
Oh my goodness. Holy mackerel. Dundalk area, Baltimore, right? Fort Holabird.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah, we went through that intel school, or I went through
Yeah.
that intel school there.
Holy mackerel.
When I saw you, you had just, the Mike Force had just moved in to help us at B-43.
That
And that's
must
the
have been
last-
in early 70.
Well, I left there in December, and that's about the time I think you got there. We talked just a little bit. I don't think you had been in country that long.
I got in country my first time in late 68. I was in the Trang for about 6 months.
Yeah,
And then I went down to 4 Corps. I was in B-40 and A-403.
yeah. I saw you at B-43. That's the last time I saw you.
Wow.
And then
Were
I went back to Vietnam. I went back in 73 and ran a search team for Charlie Beckwith
oh,
for MIAs and POWs.
yeah.
And,
Beckwith was the C team commander, right?
well,
This is in Thailand. This is JCRC. This is
Yeah.
JCRC was in Thailand, and we staged out of Thailand. And for a short time, I was in Saigon, but then the State Department ran me out. You know, it was that JCRC was an interesting thing, you know.
Beckwith moved to Australia. And you want to talk about a small world. My first cousin named Stuart Fox was a expatriate, anti-everything. You want me to stop, Stephen?
Oh, you've got to miss. You're talking about Hackworth. You're talking about Beckwith.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I'm talking
Hackworth.
about Charlie Beckwith that ran that messed up breed and ran with Dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
Hackworth's an interesting story in and of
Hackworth.
itself.
Yeah. I told you my memory is shot.
Well, you had the country right. You had part of the name right.
Can you finish the Colonel Hackworth story? I'm curious about that a little bit. My dad
Hackworth
didn't.
was the C team commander, and he retired, and he was in special forces, so they never made him a general. And he retired to Australia. And again, my first cousin, who was a expat, ended up in Australia. He was a fairly famous photographer, worked for Pearl Buck and all that. And Charlie Hackworth. I don't remember Hackworth's first name.
David.
Hackworth was his neighbor, and they became good friends. And again, small world.
Well, let me correct it. Hackworth was the senior advisor to the 44th Special Tactical Zone. If he had anything to do with Special Forces, it was not in Vietnam. The senior advisors to the 44th Special Tactical Zone which was headquartered in Chowduck, Paul, had an officer there by the name of Vinh Han, colonel, Vietnamese colonel. Hackworth wrote a book about face in which he talked about how David Hackworth, was the only guy who really knew how to win a war. And what he did was he bribed his counterpart in order to have him have total control over everything that happened in the core area. The fact is that when Saigon fell, that fellow Vinh Han was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff for the South Vietnamese Army in Saigon. And his task on the last days of Saigon was to bring the surrender message to the radio station. After delivering the surrender message, he went back to his apartment and put on his North Vietnamese uniform. He was the highest ranking North Vietnamese officer in the South Vietnamese Army. And Hackworth never knew it. By allowing this guy to buy $5,000 in MPC out of Hackworth's little PX, he was financing the local VC to the tune of about $15,000 a month in black market value. And the reason Hackworth went to Australia is because the commander of 4 Corps, the senior advisor of 4 Corps, had threatened or had reported him to the IRS for malfeasance and all kinds of things. So Hackworth went to Australia, where he remained until the period of time when he couldn't be touched was over with. Excuse me for a minute.
Call from
Very interesting history. Very interesting history. Background. Paul, where do you live now?
I live in Livingston, Texas, close to the lake.
Do you spend 20 years or more in the Army and retire?
Counting reserve time and everything. Yeah, I survived all the rifts and all that kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
And but they still got me in a way. I got out on a disability. But it's all been good. I got out as a lieutenant colonel. My Beckwith story was old Sergeant Charlie. He had Delta Force there for a while.
Yep.
And he was a hard charging guy, but he was getting up a little bit in age. And we weren't allowed to take any weapons with us when we went in country on those MIA operations. That was some of our State Department working for us. And so you did a lot of running. That was your best defense. You were going to run. So they had an airstrip that went about 9 miles around Nakhon Phanom there in Thailand. And old Beckwith would suit up and take us out on these ferocious damn forced road marches. And then he got the idea that we were going to run half of it and walk half of it. Well, hell, he become a heat casualty. And so we had to load him up and take him out. But, the guy tried. And that raid in Iran, that broke his heart. And the last time I saw him, he was in a wheelchair and he was down in Austin, Texas. When he got out of the military, he tried to run some type of security operation. But he's gone now. And his last years was a lot of frustration because he took the blame for Iran, and it was Carter that messed that thing up. But a good man. JCRC, we were at the mercy of that 4-party commission that was running Vietnam. And they would tell us where we could go and where we couldn't go. But from my first mission that I ran there to the last one, the VC trailed us, or the NVA trailed us. and then eventually they ambushed us. And a guy by the name of Dick Reese and a sergeant by the name of Hall and a Graves registration guy were killed in that. And Reese got the Distinguished Service Medal, as I found out just from Stephen the other day. But you know, it was a good operation, and I'm proud to say that I did recover MIAs. I got 7 on one operation and about 9 on another one. And they were all identified as missing in action, and both of them from helicopter crashes. But we were very limited in what we could do, and it was State Department finally come out and said, no, it don't make sense to send live guys after dead guys, because they wouldn't let us take any weapons in there to defend ourselves.
I want to personally thank you for doing that.
Yep.
So it was the highlight of my career, really. It's something that I will always treasure.
Stephen, you're muted.
Pardon me?
Stephen, you're talking and you're mute. Yeah.
Yeah, Dick, take over.
Yeah.
Hey Terry, when you were with B-40 staging out of B-43 there for a while, then they were building a new camp. You remember that?
No, I don't.
You know, we were in that shithole of a camp there that was on the runway when I lived in a what was supposed to have been a latrine. And you know, they had but I had at least wood sided on mine. A lot of guys were still in tents, and you know, it wasn't a very glamorous lifestyle for a B team.
No.
Pretty crappy.
You guys, I admire you. You got better memories than I do about some of the things. I don't know if my mind blocked a lot of that out, or I just my memory's fading, but I don't remember a lot of the details that you guys were describing.
Well, they had a Slovak, like so many of the sergeant majors used to be in special forces. And the name was Kuligowski. And he kind of ramrodded the building of that new camp over there. And I never.
Who are we talking about now?
The new B team at B-43. And we talked about it a little bit, Steve, when they were building it. It was on the other side of town, you know. There was a little town right there in Chilang.
Chilang, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember.
Now the Arvin had a big setup. That was on the other
Now,
side.
you're talking about Al Slagaki. Polish. Not
Yeah.
local.
What's his name again?
Al Slagaki. Unfortunately, he's having some problems hearing, and he can't be with us today. He lives
Yeah,
far.
good guy.
He also wrote an interesting book too. The Autumn Man by Al Slagaki.
How about that?
What a mess. Hey, hold that up again, Steve. I didn't get that last name.
A lot of back on camera here.
Slugaki.
Slugocki.
All right. Slugaki.
In fact, the Polish sales were higher than his English sales.
Guys, I'm getting pressure. I have some other obligations here. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this. And Steve, you have my undying admiration for what you're doing. I really appreciate this invite and the opportunity. And Paul, it's nice talking to you, and Don and Dick and Seth hearing about your father. I very much appreciate this opportunity.
But before you run away, let me put a little advertisement in. Any of you who haven't got it, I reprinted the full set of these Green Beret magazines,
Yeah,
all 52 magazines from Vietnam. And they're kind of a yearbook of everything we did from 66 to 70. So that's one of many things that's available on the website.
I
And-
appreciate that. And I'm gonna go there when I have an opportunity a little later today. But guys, thank you. I very, very, very much appreciate the opportunity, and
Terry, it was just wonderful seeing you again, bud. And
you too.
And
we won't talk about
I often think about when we were young and what we did.
A different life, absolutely amazing, and only we can appreciate it. Those around us really don't, and but thank you again, Steve. I very much appreciate this opportunity, and I'd be interested in doing it again. Guys, best wishes to you all. Stay
All of
safe
you
out
have
there.
the email addresses from this team on the email I sent to you.
Yes,
There's nothing preventing you from organizing your own Zoom meeting, which is free for 40 minutes.
yep.
So you can do it without me. I've done the work of finding you guys. Now it's your job to keep
Very
up.
much appreciated.
All
Thank
right.
you, guys. I gotta run.
Take
Okay,
care.
guys.
Good
Bye.
to meet you.
Honor to
see
meet
you.
all of you. Thank you very much, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going off too. Got another appointment.
Okay, Dick,
Hope we get together again.
did you know a guy named DeGurkey there, who's the XO?
The jerky, yeah.
I got his obituary. Let me see if I can find it and put it up here. He was a fascinating guy after
He
Vietnam.
was. Yeah, in fact, he got in trouble with oh God. Why can't I remember her name? Oh, shoot.
I'm gonna sign off too, guys. It's good to see y'all. Hope we can
Okay.
meet again.
Pleasure seeing you.
Take care.
Take it easy. Yeah, he got in trouble for telling oh God, the actress that visited all the camps.
Martha Ray.
Martha Ray.
Maggie, Colonel Maggie, she came out to the camp. I wasn't there. It happened before I got there. And he gave her a bad time about being an officer. And she stood him up against a wall at attention and gave him the facts. And that went through the entire team. They talked about that forever.
Well, hold on here for a minute. I will bring this up. Share the screen. It's amazing how many obituaries you have that that was the important part of their life. You can see here the picture they put with his obituary had an SF hat on it. Aside from his early life where he fled Hungary and had to be left in a German hospital because he had TB, he finally got here and joined SF and went to Vietnam. After that, he offered a position of team chief of the Voyager General Space Data Team, a jet propulsion laboratory, where he worked at JPL building things there for all the little satellites that were going down there. He had their papers on the web for his design of a mule train of blimps, Zeppelins. He wrote a book, Reflections in a Monsoon, under a different name, is linked on the website there. And he also wrote a book called The Cognitive Dynamics of Computer Science, which I'm not buying because I don't think I'm going to know anything about what the hell he's talking about. So he's just really among the many fascinating people of Special Forces. He's one of the top numbers.
He is that for sure.
Yeah,
He was
amazing.
interesting when I was there.
Stephen, from B-43, there was a guy, a captain by the name of Tom Lumen. Did you ever get anything on him, or another guy by the name of Captain Gerhard Frick?
Frick, I had some effort to find him. Let's see, this is B-43. Lumen. What was Lumen's job on the team?
S3.
LEW, okay. He is deceased.
Oh man.
And Frick was the XO and CO, I think. No,
He was the S2.
he was the S2. On another team, he was XO and CO. Frick, FRICK. I tracked him down to Washington State, Gig Harbor, but I've called a number of phone numbers there, but not been able to find him.
No.
I think I talked to his son named Ted, and his son was supposed to get him to call me back, but it never happened. So, Mike, you haven't had anything to say here. Mike Shad, you're muted. You're muted.
There. Yeah. Most of the stuff y'all are talking about happened right before I got there or right after I left.
Well, then you got to fill us in what happened when you were there.
It wasn't all that exciting. Probably the thing that was the most newsworthy is that we had a Navy SEAL team was there. This is at 421. And they had a big deuce and a half with full of Cambodian soldiers and this Navy team and 2 or 3 of our guys, including the captain, the team leader. And they think that somebody's grenade fell off and got kicked around in the bed of the truck, and it killed a bunch of people. And our team leader, Captain Holka, was medevaced out.
And a guy by the name of McDonald came in after that.
Dennis McDonald, I think he was right after I left the S4 of the B team.
Yeah, I worked with him at B-43.
I think he got in a firefight and got captured or something, and he stayed captive a couple of days, as I remember, because I had already left the B team.
Yeah. And then there was a guy by the name of Rocky Rosado.
Rocky Rosado, yeah.
Yeah.
He was
Right.
in OCS with me, and he was a retired or an enlisted man. He's a sergeant first class or master sergeant, but he went to OCS and interesting guy.
He got shot on the mountain right outside of, at the end of the airstrip there at B-43. And Tom Lumen and I went up there and pulled him off the mountain. That was quite a day, but he survived that.
Yeah.
And I've never heard of him again.
Well, I don't remember when he was killed, but he is deceased, and I think it was he made it back from Vietnam. I know that much.
Yeah.
Are you spelling that Rizzat?
No, Spanish. Rosario.
Jamie T, I think it was.
Yeah,
Jamie T. Rosario.
Rosado. He and I got soldiers medals for that particular thing. And I never saw him after I left.
You know, I remember when that grenade incident happened, because I think I was at Kowloon. The B team was at Kowloon then, and that was
It was a mess.
SWAT, right?
Yeah, Baswai.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
That's about the only exciting thing that went on. Otherwise, other than shooting in the Viet Cong as they hung themselves in the barbed wire that he did every day.
Yeah. You ever make it down to that little pagoda church thing down there? That was always good for a little action out of Botswana.
Mm-hmm.
That team had mixed Cambodian and Vietnamese, always did, didn't it?
But I had always thought it was kind of humorous, because when I was in right after OCS, I was a training officer at Fort Bliss, and they looked for volunteers to do language school and then go to Vietnam. And I figured, this was in '67, I figured there's no way that war is going to last that long, so I'll just go ahead and keep extending and take as many courses and stuff as I could. And when I finished the Vietnamese language school, which was 10 months in downtown Washington, D.C., and I was relatively fluent at that point. But we, what was I going to say? Oh, I thought it was humorous that as soon as I get certified as a Vietnamese language user, they sent me to this camp that was 100% Cambodian. So I just spent a year almost trying to figure out who I'm talking to and what language do I need to use.
Well, Rosado died in 1999
Mm-hmm.
in Augusta. He was medevaced and medically retired
Yeah,
in Vietnam.
yeah, he was shot up pretty bad.
The other person you were talking about before McDonald was John Holka.
Yeah.
And the guy before him was John Alexander, who was on yesterday.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
41 thing.
I got there in Thanksgiving Day of 68. 68.
But speaking about shooting them up, we had a guy on the team, Richard, who was the team sergeant at the time, and his DROS was up. And he couldn't get a chopper to come in to Vinja to pick him up, to take him home. And he started getting really nervous. He'd get on the radio and transmit in the blind, telling him, please come get me. I need to go home. and offer them all sorts of booze if they'd come in and pick him up. And we finally got tired of listening to him. And Lieutenant Dezerky and I made up a plan whereby we were going to have a fake attack on the camp. He and I went out into the center of the camp and we planted an explosive with a timer on it. And we talked to all of the Vietnamese, the CIDG, the LLDB in camp, and told them, this is what we're going to do. One corner of the camp starts firing individually, and then it builds as if it's an attack on the camp. In the meantime, Smitty went into the Radio Shack and he unhooked the antenna because he knew what Richard was going to do. He knew Richard would get in there and immediately beg for help, tell him we were being attacked. And we let Tin Bin know about the fake attack also, so they wouldn't think that we were being hit. So finally it happens. And I get out there and I fire off a bunch of illumination rounds from the mortar that we had, and everybody cuts loose. And needless to say, Richard immediately went into the Radio Shack and he started transmitting for help. And after it was all over, we had a great laugh, and he cussed us out something fierce.
Mm.
But that was a moment to remember in Vinja.
But the fake attack didn't get you any air support.
Yeah.
Look,
Hey, Stephen, there were at the MEDOC camp in '69, if my memory serving me right, there was a lieutenant by the name of Lemon or Limon.
Laman.
He was killed.
No. Okay. Mida is okay. Open.
The first lieutenant Limon.
That's me in high. 433.
Yeah.
Open. 433.
So we're starting the process. I have a number of lists of folks.
Okay.
I think that
Lumen was there.
Yeah, he was.
feel free to reach out to us.
Luciano T. Brash was the team sergeant.
Okay, Brash is there. I don't see a lieutenant of that name, and I certainly don't see one that's killed. Sparks was killed in '68. Schubert was killed in '67. I don't have any lieutenants killed there, and I don't have any lieutenants with a name close to that. There is a Laman, and there's a Lumen.
Lumen was Captain Tom Lumen.
Right, and Laman was at another camp, and he is one of the oldest law firms in Oklahoma.
Okay.
I don't see this. I can look at another place shortly. Let me.
No, that name just came into my memory a couple of days ago, and I thought
Anyway, Dick's story reminded me of this book by Lloyd Little, and this is the greatest novel about the Vietnam War, that this should be the MASH of the Vietnam War, but Vietnam War wasn't popular. So it got lost. But like your friend over there, the story is based on a TDY team in the Delta who is inundated with floods during the rainy season. And when they finally get communications restored, they call up the SFOB and say, all right, we're ready to come out. We're overdue for returning to home. They say, no, your team returned home already. You're VC. So because they're stuck in this situation, they decided to make the most of it. They're in a Wahao area of the Delta, where they take advantage of the Wahao entrepreneurial interests. They charter a sailing ship that floats up and down the canals and brings commodities back and forth. They make it a really vibrant economic zone. And they're approached by both sides about wanting to cooperate in the war. And they say, no, we'll take care of everything here. And we're on your side, whatever your side is. So they're pretty well left alone to have a peaceful economic environment for a while. But then the generals on both sides decide they want a briefing about what was happening. So both generals come in on the same day, and the camp tells the other one that general is being paid by us. So they do a briefing about the enemy situation in the area without naming who the enemy is. And it goes on from there. It's just a great story. But your story about the guy who wanted to get out and do anything at home reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Well, Vinh, as I recall, that would be a camp to be concerned about because that daggone camp wasn't very well enforced. It was just kind of sparse. It was very sparse.
Yeah, it was. And the defenses were falling apart.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember when they wanted me to continue the moat around the camp because it didn't go all the way around the camp. And I gathered a bunch of shape charges and TNT and made some big explosions on that moat to dig it out using explosives. And it was great. I've got some photographs of the rounds going off and forming atom bomb type clouds over the camp. It was a great time. Needless to say, I was the demolition sergeant on the team. And I got my kicks doing that.
Yeah, it just sat out there in the middle of nowhere, you know.
It did.
Right on.
It was so far away from everybody, it was ridiculous. In fact, there were times when we couldn't even make radio communications with anybody.
No.
It was,
The single sideband was about all you could do coming out of there. Yeah, it was.
yeah.
And down on those FOBs, that was worse yet, you know.
Yeah, the Jantan FOB was way out in the middle of nowhere. And in fact, I can remember I made commo with the
Oh my God.
The outpost from I think it's Han Tien on the coast. And
look at that.
And the guy who was there was of Mexican nationality. And he would sign off by saying, oh, what was it? I forget what he'd say, but I remember our call sign at Jantan was Alamo. And I'd always say, sign off with, remember the Alamo. Out.
When I'd go down that canal, the movie Apocalypse Now, you know, where they're going down that canal and into that place in Cambodia, that's what I thought about all the time now after seeing that.
Oh, yeah.
Because
It
you
was
were just,
desolate.
you were nowhere, man.
Yeah. And it was even worse during the rainy season when it was all
Oh,
flooded.
yeah, hell yeah.
I've got photographs of the entire area around Jantan and Vinja being underwater,
Yeah, I'm
with,
sure.
with the only thing being above ground is the huts that the floors were underwater.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. In fact, I sent a letter home with a letterhead on it saying USS Vinja, the finest ship afloat, and had a green beret with his arms and head above the water, saying help.
From the map, it doesn't look like it's a very defensible area. And if somebody was over here with some fairly heavy artillery, they,
Yeah.
they could do whatever they wanted without repercussions.
Yeah. In
Well,
fact,
at night, you could see a lot of activity over there in Cambodia, a lot of truck traffic and all that, you know, of course.
Oh, it's pretty open over there, really.
Oh, yeah, my God.
Right.
Flat as
But
could be.
you know, one of the problems with it is if they came in, took the camp, they wouldn't have any idea what to do with it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why they never took it, because what was the value of it? I
Yeah.
think that's why we gave it to the Vietnamese to run.
Right.
They just kind of kept that canal open, because that canal went all the way down to Ha Tien.
Can.
Yeah. When you went there, did they still have that, what do they call them? The chimneys for cooking outdoors on field problems. Oh shoot. I forget what they call it now, but what the Vietnamese had done at Vinja was they fashioned that chimney thing into an artillery piece, looking like an artillery piece, with it pointed towards the Cambodian outpost
There was this
at Vinja,
huge mound thing out there,
right on the canal.
right on the canal. But in looking at this map and what I remember of Vinjai, we went out the wire and the canal was right there.
Yeah,
This map makes it look like it's a little bit away, but yeah, Vinjai just sat right there on that canal.
it did. In fact, we had a dock there,
Yeah, dock.
and the dock, when it was low water, had a pretty steep climb on that wooden dock. And I communicate with Cezanne, he's Special Forces Mike Force, and he keeps mentioning a time when he went down to Vinja after it had been turned over to the Vietnamese, and he remembers climbing that dock and being so tired when he did it.
That whole area down there was a swamp, and you know,
It was, especially during monsoon season.
oh, you go down that canal on both sides of that. You talk about ambush points. I never understood why, and I made a lot of trips.
Yeah,
nothing ever happened.
I know. Yeah, I felt the same way because, especially when we made round trips,
Yeah,
I figured the VC would be waiting for us on the return trip
yeah. Those
because
same
they
day
know
trips.
we'd be coming back that same way with a boat with very few people in it.
Yeah,
But we never got ambushed, and we always got intel about VC crossing the border and being in our villages.
yeah.
But what was there along the bank that would give them any degree of protection? It's an open swamp or.
Oh, it was heavily forested on both
Yeah.
sides of that canal.
Yeah,
And then you would
Steve.
go out that into an open area. They're just perfect ambush sites all up and down there. But nothing ever happened.
yeah.
Steve, do you know about the tram forest?
I spent time in the tram forest.
I did too. That last 3 months of my tour down there, I was S4, but we had to we went on operations every night, and
Yeah,
I alternate with one of the other officers. But we had it was I got 2 air medals out of the deal just flying these they would put us in at night
yeah.
and then pick us up later in the night, and then I would switch with the American officer. We would take these they would just ride around in a circle in the helicopter until they drew fire. And once they drew the fire, they would insert the rest of them in there. And we had a relatively good body count out of the deal. But in fact, there's an article in the magazine that talks about that whole process.
Yeah, I think that was, the call sign for that was Operation Delta Blackhawk. Does that ring a bell with you?
Black Hawk was a generic Navy term for a series of operations they ran.
Yeah,
But the Tram Forest is interesting because in 1973, the Vietnamese were able to pretty well clear it out. The South Vietnamese were able to clear it out. So it had been really a major base area within the Delta. And they also were able to clear out the Seven Mountains area in 73 as well.
Yeah.
So they did quite well up until the point when they basically ran out of ammunition. So 73 was the high point.
Well, they flooded it with Agent Orange,
yeah, they did.
and
They did.
I have to have them to thank.
Yeah, I remember flying over that thing, and the effects of that Agent Orange was just absolutely devastating, because there was a huge, what was it, mangrove swamps in the tram forest.
It looked like the Everglades in Florida.
Yeah. That was a terrible place to operate. It was always hot and always wet.
Yeah.
Yeah. But talking about the Seven Mountains in Nui Kodo was a nemesis with me, and I was there when they did the big operation on Nui Kodo, and we finally took it. Then we lost it a couple months later. But now you can go up Nui Kodo. I think they got a road going to the top of that thing.
You do, yeah.
Souvenirs they sell. I got ice cream set up.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that on the broadcast on the Zoom thing yesterday from Bus Y.
My. Something else. I wish I'd have made that deal with all the guys from Boss Y. for a lot of the B-43 stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was sorry I had to leave it so soon because I had a wound clinic appointment halfway through it, so I had to leave it.
Yeah.
Are we going to do this again sometime, Steve?
It's really up to you guys to organize it yourself, because I'm doing 100 A teams. I've got another 2 months to go before I finish up the whole project. I've done every camp in the north of this. I'm working my way south. So next week I'll start on B-41 teams and then B-40 teams. And that will finish up, although I've got a couple of little places to catch up on. So you're really going to be on your own while you try to take the lists I have for each individual camp and just get each other together. You can do a Zoom for free for 40 minutes, or if you need more, I can set you up for a meeting time, and you can do your own meeting.
Yeah.
But I can't really spend more than the time I've already spent. Probably it goes about half a week is spent just locating the people on the team. And that's over a 2-week period of time.
Well, you've done a marvelous job. I'm just amazed at what you did.
And then,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
then the meeting. So, you know, that's a lot of effort. And I can't come back. I'm really disappointed in some teams, like the Bosqui meeting last time. I had some 30-something invitations, and we only had about less than 10 people.
Wow.
That's very unfortunate.
Please listen to this important message from the
You know, so everybody who missed it, that's unfortunate, but you know, that's life. Certainly we got a lot of VA appointments in our time, so that is a problem. But just the fact that people who were available didn't show up, that's disappointing. The stuff I'm getting from the people who do show up is fascinating history. And I hope, I talked to the girl who helps me out with the video, and I hope she gets around to editing it a little faster than she's been doing. She promised she'd try. And I'll get these things posted as soon as I can. But it's a lot of fun to do them. And you don't realize how important the small pieces of information are in terms of things that are going to be forgotten by history.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and I don't know if they came up with Bosqui and that video, but you know, that was the first time I saw the sensors being used was at Bosqui, and they called it Operation Duffel Bag.
Right.
And we went and put those sensors out, and they put a monitoring station right there in Bosqui.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the technology that they were using then compared to today, my goodness. But it still was pretty mind-boggling what they were doing back. That would have been 69, 70, I guess.
Well, they already had some experience with sensors in I-Corps.
Yeah.
And so they were trying other things. There was another project called Sonia that was a similar project being done in 4 Corps along with Duffel Bag. Duffel Bag was highly supported by the Navy, and that probably was one of the things in its favor. The way the Pentagon works is every service has to spend a little bit of money getting their nose into everything. So,
you know, now that you mention that was Navy guys that ran that bunker.
yeah.
Yeah.
And at Bosqui, they had searchlight teams out there. Some other unusual things that SF had, or was a location for experimentation.
Yeah, I was there when they had the searchlight team.
when I went back home in 1968, my father was an engineer at the Lincoln Laboratories in my hometown. And Lincoln Laboratories was an MIT research facility. And when I was home, somebody from the lab sent me a paper through him about a test of a radar equipment in Vietnam that was designed for SF camps. And he asked me, why didn't they get the support that they had hoped for and the interest that they had hoped for? And I took a look at what they were doing and just answered, you were a pain in the ass, actually, rather than being helpful to the team. The radar really wasn't very effective. It required a lot of resources from the team that they didn't have the time to give you. And you just expected too much and you approached them in the wrong way.
Yeah, we had one of those radar teams that was TDY out of the 6th group that was at Kai for I don't know how long, but there were 3 men from the 6th group that were assigned to that radar team. And they put the radar unit up on top of our observation tower at Kai.
Yeah.
And
Gold Tower.
yeah, it was, the radar unit was labeled as man portable, but it certainly wasn't. In fact, they had it set up on that tower permanently because it was way too heavy to move around. But it picked up a lot of movement. We caught some VC that were used to moving around in the wire without being seen. And that thing spotted them. So we surprised quite a few VC with that unit.
There were a lot of experiments done, and the SF camps let Natick and other Army laboratories play games. One of the better stories I recall is Special Forces had a psychiatrist, TDY to Vietnam, who was out trying to determine stress levels of the Special Forces camps. And when I was in Pleiku, my mother sent me an article from the New York Times that said the average life of a camp commander was 3 months. And I had 28 camps in 2 Corps, had been there since 1965, and the number of 3-month blocks of time that had gone by far exceeded the numbers of dead captains we had. So I was always interested in following that up. And in all the time I've been doing research, when something tingled my ear about that, I remembered it. He spent a lot of time in the camps, and the SF NCOs were yanking his chain totally. They were telling him stories, and he was writing down how there was a competition between the NCOs and the officers at the SF camps. The NCOs challenging the officers to go to more dangerous levels of daring do. And that was one of the reasons why all these captains were getting killed, because they weren't getting killed. But that's what he reported. Then I had stories from one guy who said he was at an OP up on a hill out of the camp. He hadn't any food or anything else for several days. A helicopter came overhead and said, "Here, I'm coming here for you. I'm dropping a line down." He dropped the line down. At the end of the line was a cup for him to pee in. So the psychiatrist could test the stress levels. No food, no rations, no nothing else, just a cup to pee in. And then another story was on the same lines, how they would chase the camp monkey around to make the monkey pee in the cup so they could give it to the psychiatrist. So there was a limit to the reliability of the research that was being done in many places.
Steve, have you found Dennis McDonald?
Brian, was it Dennis or Brian?
Well, he took
Holker's place.
my place. Took no,
Yeah.
I can't remember. I just didn't know if he'd been talking to you or not.
Let me go back and find out where he is here.
Okay.
You know, I remember sitting in the hooch with him as he was packing up and getting his gear together to go out and relieve you at Boswai. And we were at Kowloon when he was doing that. I remember just sitting there bullshitting with him about where it was going.
Yeah.
Which camp was he going to? Kai? Or
No.
He was at Boswai.
Boswai, okay.
Yeah.
Boswai, Brian G. McDonald. He is deceased.
Yeah. Brian G.
He is deceased.
He is deceased. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Let me look over here.
Huh.
Whew. You remember a lieutenant by the name, Mike, do you remember a lieutenant by the name of Fluman?
No. Was he assigned to the team?
He came out to Boswai probably a month or so. Well, he came after you left.
McDonald died in 2016, I believe.
Okay.
Wow.
It was reported a drop a bit late. In fall of 18, it was reported in a drop. One guy I haven't been able to locate is a guy by the name of John Rupp. And he was the last commander at Boswai. And I'm pretty sure he was a medical service officer. Not a doctor, but a medical service officer. So
why would they put a medical service officer in charge of a command like Boswai?
He had a slot on the staff, and not a medical service slot of the C team, I believe. And you know, when his time was up, they needed somebody there to replace Fitzgerald, and so he went out there for 3-4 months. And he is not the only medical service officer. Steve Sosa, for example, way back in '65, actually was very significant in establishing the I-Corps Mike Force, and he was a medical service officer. It's a branch. SF is branching material.
Yeah.
But this guy Rupp, I was never able to find.
Steve, I think I need to cut out. Are you doing some more on 421 tomorrow?
No, tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we're moving over to who is it? Whoever 423 was.
Tin Bin?
Tin Bin. Yeah, Tin Bin and median high, I guess. 423 was tin bin. They closed that and they later opened up median high. Or maybe it was that median high or me forte. Let me see here. Open 423. Tin bin median high, right? That's will be in another half hour.
Okay. I'm going to sign off.
Okay.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I'm pleased you got here.
Yeah. May check in tomorrow, so we'll see.
Well, tomorrow nothing. Just check in another hour.
Oh, okay.
Tomorrow I'm got a VA appointment all day. They called me up earlier and said I shouldn't eat, and it was going to be a 6-hour test.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Good luck.
Okay.
Nice talking to you.
Good to see you again. Since you escaped the Houston area, I had to go re-find you again.
Yeah. It's just, I really wish I could have heard some of that stuff from the B-43 teams, you know.
Well, it's all been recorded. And when I finish this, I'm thinking about an idea, which is basically to have people do their own interviews. Just set up in front of your own camera and talk about your time at the camp. Limit yourself to the specific camp. You can do multiple interviews, but I'll just patch them on to the end of the camp video.
Has anybody ever done a comprehensive report on JCRC?
No, there's really nothing that's really a narrative report. I made a listing of all the people who were assigned to it, or all the people I could identify who were assigned to it, which became problematic because JCRC went beyond that. It went to a staff function that lasted, a number of years past 1975.
Yeah, I mean, it went Graves or the SEAL SEAL team stuff and Graves registration and all that, but the operating teams, I
did a pretty good job of listing the teams, but a narrative of the teams and also getting the individual reports, because each team that went out on a mission submitted an individual report.
Yeah, I did. I did.
And finding those individual reports, which should be somewhere, but probably are being held by the DPMO and not being released. A collection of those reports would be an interesting addition to the.
We went in on one mission right out of Cameron Bay. And it was a C-130 that clipped the top of the mountain there. And you could see just perfectly how it went in. And then went down the side of it, reverse side. And they could never get up there to do a complete and total recovery. So I ran an operation up there and picked up 20 some pillowcases of remains. Now they wrote that whole thing off, but we also found MACV cards and other different things. And they were supposed to match all that up with the manifest that they had. Well, if you wanted to jump a flight, particularly going to Cameron Bay, you got on there. And I don't know if they, in the back of my mind, and what troubled me was that we might not have accounted for everybody that was on that C-130, because the manifest that I saw and what we picked up, there was additional names. Now those bones never went in for identification. Normally the bones, when we found them, they went to the SEAL tie team and they worked on identifying them. That was before the days of DNA. But they burn all that stuff. They burn all that in Saigon. 20 some pillowcases of human remains. Oh,
Well, actually, you know, that's a good project if you take an interest in. Even if it's a matter of inquiry. The place to inquire are a DPMO office and the Pentagon Library and National Archives. And also a guy by the name of Jay Veith. If they have any idea where the JPRC reports are. I mean, there's a very finite number of operations that you ran. I mean, there was maybe 50 max operations. You're not talking
wasn't
about
that many JCRC operations. There was maybe 7 or 8. And then when Reese was killed, they pretty much put an end to it.
Yeah, but there were more than 7 or 8 investigations that were run by that time. I don't remember what I had come up with a number. I know it wasn't a large number.
Yeah.
It was more like it would be 30 or something like that.
Or maybe in the whole existence of it, you know, I was one of the originators on that stuff, and the year I was there, we did 7 or 8. I don't know what they did after the ambush.
After the ambush, it stopped.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not sure, but yeah.
And, you know, we were also used in Cambodia for the evacuation of the American embassy.
And you were used in Saigon.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, there was a
feature was there in Saigon.
I think that operation was called Operation Eagle Pool.
Then there we have more information on. We don't. I am in the process right now of finishing off a collection of DAO reports, and the only thing that's stopping me is I'm missing about 25 pages that were not properly copied from the original documents. And I got a guy in Washington, I've sent him very detailed instructions because he went there one time to the National Archives and they gave him the wrong file. I told him copy page 25. He copied page 25, but it was from the wrong report. So I gave him detailed instructions to tell him the last word on the page before and the first word on the page afterward, so that he can identify what he's copying. And he has been put off until September to go back to the archives because of COVID-19 restrictions.
Yeah.
But when I get those 25 pages, I've got 1,000 pages of quarterly reports from Saigon from the 73 to 75 time frame. And it's fascinating information that nobody pays a lot of attention to because the Americans basically weren't there. But it was really good stuff. And I want to put it out, but I want those 25 pages because.
Yeah, there was still some folks there. General Kingston sent me back to Saigon, and I was trying to establish a liaison between JCRC and the operations selections that were coming out of Saigon. The guy who ran that was, and he was probably a CIA guy by the name of Hatcher James. I don't know if you ever come across that, but he had a little network of people that was still going out. So there was some things on a very limited basis being run out there, but they weren't guys in army suits doing it.
Well, it was kind of funny. on some of those reports. For instance, they listed very often the visitors that they had from outside out of country, and you know, at the end of each report would be the quarterly visitors. And at one time, they had a visitor by the name of Sullivan Fontaine.
Solly Fontaine.
Sully was his name, but somebody in the office decided that that was a nick. That had to be a nickname.
I worked for Solly.
They reported it as Sullivan Fontaine.
Did you know Solly?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I unfortunately I didn't find that until after he died. I think he would have got a kick out of seeing his name in that report.
I liked Solly. He's a good guy.
Let me go here. Where is it? Here we are. Okay, share the screen and share the share. All right. We'll see what this is. Just the, yeah, these are the originals. I don't want those. I'll open. I lost the place. Open in. Yeah. Now, there we go. All right, where is? I guess this is not organized yet. So I don't know if I'm not working my way through this properly. I transcribed all of it, so it was it was readable, and you know, the originals look like this. So you go down to the end, and you see the visitors. Let's get that picture off the screen.
There's one. There's a JCRC guy. He took over after Kingston, I guess.
Olutowski was after Kingston, yeah.
Olutowski, yeah.
No, this is their list of visitors. Olutowski's back again and again. I'm really not set up to do the things I can do when I finish this thing. Let's see, search. Well, that's, oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. Okay. What was the name of the guy you're talking about? Harper James?
Yeah, Hatcher James.
Hello to James.
No, it didn't come up with his name.
Wait a minute. I need to get away from.
Um,
Okay, try that again. Yes, it is.
it's kind of neat. Colonel Sullivan Fontaine. When I get the things properly set up, I can do a search over thousands of pages and find any word anywhere in no time. So,
I was curious about that guy. We had problems getting operations approved, and he seemed to be the stumbling block behind a lot of it.
but Hatcher James,
Yeah.
the name is familiar. I'm not placing it, but no, I don't know that they have a good list in here. Friendly situation. Yeah, somewhere there's a good list of the actual assets for the DAO office.
Yeah.
I think it's in one of the in reports that I haven't posted to this yet. But that's the nice thing about getting to understand some of the documentation there. You find out where things are supposed to be, and you find out what's available.
Hey, just as a side note, when we were talking about Tom Lumen and Brash being at MEDA together, when I went out to MEDA, Lumen was out on an operation, and Brash was the only one in camp, and he was a real dark-haired, hairy animal-looking thing, And he was sitting in the middle of the damn dining room table, picking his fingernails with a knife. The vision don't go away. And I introduced my, hey, I'm going to be operating out of here for a while, and all that. And where's Lumen? Anyway, him and Lumen got in a fight when Lumen got back there because Bryce didn't do something, and Lumen hit him with a sugar shaker. One of them heavy glass sugar shakers across the table at him. They got rid of Bryce, and Bryce continued to be a bit of a bad apple. I ran into him again on Okinawa, and he got busted for bringing opium and crap in from Vietnam in body bags. And he did some big time, and he may still be in Japan somewhere, but a Master Sergeant Luciano T. Bryce. Remember that deal where they had dope in cadavers?
Yeah, it's a typical movie plot.
Oh, this one was for real. I know they had it in golf clubs and stuff like that. Anyway, they got caught. And of course, he caught it from both ends, from the Japanese and the American military.
Hmm. Where the hell's Tin Bin?
Huh?
I had a map of Tin Bin over here I was gonna pull up, but I can't find it.
Oh,
Well, let's see what's up here. Um, okay, here we go. Key line. I don't know where it is now. Oh, well. Guess we got people coming in.
yeah.
Let's see, I better sign out of this. X that.
Well, I had a great time and I certainly appreciate everything you did. And Dick, it was nice talking to you.
Same here.
I wish you the very best.
Thank you. And thank you, Steve.
Well, we're coming on to Tin Bin and Me Fukte? No, Median High, I guess, right?
All right. So I'm leaving. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. And I am going to stop recording here.